Have you ever felt like reality is shifting before your eyes, as if waking from a long dream? Spiritual awakening isn't a straight road. It's a spiral, a transformation of perception. Today, we'll uncover the 5 stages of awakening, helping you understand where you are and where your journey might lead. The first stage of spiritual awakening is the unconscious state, where the mind is entirely absorbed in the illusion of separation. Here, identity is tightly woven with thoughts, emotions, and experiences, creating a perception that life is something happening to us rather than something we actively shape. This stage is marked by deep identification with the ego, the false self that governs behavior through conditioned responses. People in this state rarely question their beliefs, assuming that their understanding of the world is absolute. In this phase, life feels chaotic, dictated by external circumstances, and suffering seems inevitable. The unconscious self reacts rather than responds, leading to frustration, blame, and an overwhelming sense of disempowerment. Emotional triggers dominate interactions, and fear, anger, and judgment arise instinctively. Relationships are transactional, shaped by expectations and attachments rather than genuine connection. The mind constantly seeks validation, approval, and material success as substitutes for inner fulfillment, unaware that such pursuits only deepen the sense of emptiness. Yet something stirs within. A fracture appears in the illusion, perhaps through a crisis, a loss, or an inexplicable longing for meaning. This is the first whisper of awakening. The individual begins to sense that life might be more than routine existence, that perhaps the self is not merely thoughts, roles, and achievements. This subtle awareness signals the transition into the second stage, the death of the ego. This stage is profoundly unsettling. The structures that once provided security, personal identity, societal roles, deeply held beliefs, begin to crumble. What once felt like truth now seems like a fragile construct. The mind struggles to hold on, resisting change, fearing the void that emerges in the absence of certainty. This is ego death, not a physical demise, but a collapse of the false self. Doubt arises. Who am I beyond these labels? If I am not my thoughts, my emotions, my past, then what remains? The process feels like losing oneself entirely, but in reality, it is a shedding of illusions. The suffering intensifies, not because the world changes, but because the veil that once dulled perception has lifted. There is a rawness and openness that feels both terrifying and liberating. The boundaries of identity blur, and for the first time, the individual glimpses the observer within, the silent presence untouched by thought, judgment, or fear. This realization creates space. The clinging to external validation weakens. The compulsion to control life diminishes. The belief in separation starts dissolving. Instead of merely existing in the mind's narrative, awareness expands, allowing for detachment from the constant stream of conditioned reactions. Life is no longer seen through the rigid framework of past experiences, but is perceived with greater clarity. The world does not change, but the way it is experienced undergoes a profound shift. As this dissolution deepens, the individual naturally transitions into the third stage, the search for truth. The mind, no longer confined by previous limitations, hungers for understanding. A desire emerges, not just for knowledge, but for wisdom that resonates with the soul. This is the phase of exploration, where spiritual teachings, meditation, self-inquiry, and philosophical perspectives become sources of guidance. Books, teachers, and practices provide temporary stepping stones, but the deeper realization is that truth is not found in external sources. It must be experienced. This stage is both exhilarating and overwhelming. The seeker encounters countless perspectives, sometimes contradictory, yet all pointing toward the same essence. The nature of consciousness, the illusion of separation, the interconnection of all things, these ideas begin to take root. Meditation becomes more than a practice. It is a doorway to stillness. Introspection reveals patterns of conditioning that have shaped behavior for years. The individual starts to witness thoughts without being controlled by them, realizing that awareness itself is the foundation of existence. There is a sense of awakening to a higher intelligence, an unfolding presence beyond the thinking mind. Synchronicities become frequent. Moments of deep peace arise unexpectedly, and the once rigid boundaries of reality feel more fluid. The search is no longer about accumulating knowledge, but about unlearning the illusions that once veiled perception. The mind begins to surrender, recognizing that true wisdom emerges not through thought, but through presence. As this shift continues, the fourth stage emerges, the emergence of the authentic self. The illusions have fallen away, and what remains is raw authenticity. There is no longer a need to pretend, to conform, to mold oneself to societal expectations. The false self, the one that sought approval, feared judgment, and carried the weight of external opinions, disintegrates. What arises in its place is pure being. This phase brings significant life changes. Relationships that no longer align dissolve naturally. Career paths shift, often dramatically, as work transforms from obligation to expression. The desire to impress or conform disappears, replaced by a deep need for integrity and truth. Communication becomes transparent, no longer filtered through fear or the need to manipulate perception. The individual speaks, acts, and lives from a place of inner knowing rather than external conditioning. The inner world also transforms. Emotional wounds surface, not as obstacles, but as opportunities for deep healing. The past loses its grip as forgiveness, both of self and others, becomes effortless. Love, once associated with attachment and expectation, expands into unconditional presence. There is no longer a dependence on external validation, as self-worth arises from an inner foundation rather than external achievement. The physical body responds to these internal shifts. Sensitivity to energy increases, intuition sharpens, and a profound sense of connection with nature emerges. Simple moments, feeling the wind, hearing the rain, witnessing a sunrise, become deeply moving, as if existence itself is revealing its sacredness in every breath. The realization dawns that everything is interconnected, that separation was always an illusion, and that life is an unfolding dance of consciousness experiencing itself. As this state deepens, the individual transitions into the final stage, a life of alignment. The journey is no longer about awakening, it is about embodiment. Spirituality is not something practiced, it is simply the way of being. The illusion of duality dissolves, and what remains is an effortless flow with existence. In this stage, there is no struggle against life. Acceptance replaces resistance. The mind no longer compulsively seeks the next moment, for fulfillment is found in the present. The heart remains open, free from fear, radiating compassion, not as an effort, but as a natural state. Challenges still arise, but suffering no longer dominates, for there is an understanding that all experiences, both joyful and painful, serve the unfolding of consciousness. This alignment is not about withdrawing from the world, but engaging with it fully. It is about becoming the space for love, wisdom, and presence in every interaction. There is no longer a need to escape suffering, because suffering is no longer perceived as an enemy. Every emotion, every experience, is embraced as part of the vast tapestry of existence. The understanding deepens that awakening is not an endpoint, it is a continuous unfolding. There is no final enlightenment, no destination to reach. Every moment is an opportunity to see more clearly, to love more deeply, to dissolve further into presence. Life itself becomes the teacher, and the individual, now fully aligned, moves through the world as a vessel of awareness. The realization dawns that the journey was never about becoming something new. It was about remembering what was always there. The search was never external. It was always about turning inward, about seeing that the self and the universe were never separate. And in that realization, there is peace. Awakening is not a path for the select few. It is the natural evolution of consciousness, unfolding uniquely in every being. Whether one lingers in a stage for years or moves rapidly through transformation, there is no right or wrong way. There is only the experience itself. The question is not whether awakening will happen. It is already happening. The only question is, are you ready to see?